And the Oscar goes to A Separation, Iran, Asghar Farhadi.
With 2011's A Separation, Asghar Farhadi placed Iran in the spotlight of international cinema. Often censored by the government, Iranian cinema has struggled for decades to establish itself on the world stage. Restrictions on the depiction of women, social issues, and violence have prevented the Iranian movie market from fully developing until the past few decades. The majority of the works made are dramas, comedies, or wholesome pro-government works, but with the newfound attention to Iranian cinema, many investors have begun backing independent creators, allowing them to create experimental genre films. Many of these films have been banned within Iran itself, but have seen release outside of their home country to critical success. A Girl Walks Home at Night, Under the Shadow, and Holy Spider are a few of these genre films dipping their toes into thriller and horror alike. One of the fathers of this genre movement is Shahram Mokri, who released his first film, Ashkan, The Charmed Ring and Other Stories, in 2008. Ashkan was a play on the nonlinear crime pictures popularized by Tarantino. Utilizing dark humor and a twisting narrative, Mokri was able to establish a unique voice within Iranian cinema. However, finding a distributor for the film wasn't as easy. Mokri spent years trying to get his movie distributed in his own country. No one wanted to risk releasing something that could financially flounder or worse, get them targeted by the government. Before it could see released, Mokri was already working on his next picture, a low-budget experimental horror piece loosely based on true events. But how could he get away with depicting the story of three cannibals and their brutal slaughter of a group of university students within the content restrictions placed by the government? He found his answer from an unlikely source, the works of M.C. Escher.
این کار خست نوشته باید بمیره. ما باید بکشیمش. چون مریضه. چون خواهرش.
میگن امشب دنیا تموم میشه. نشنیدی؟
Fishing Cat was Mokri's first film to break into the cult art house sphere, making it his most well-known film to date. Fishing Cat is a 2.5-hour slasher movie chronicling a day at the lake as multiple college students prepare for a kite tournament. They encounter three sketchy men who live in a nearby cabin and run a restaurant that sells questionable meat. One of the elements that allows Fishing Cat to stand out is its use of the one-shot technique with no cuts in the film. The majority of headlines and reviews about the film refer to it as the one-shot Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a pitch that is extremely misleading. Fishing Cat is slow, relentlessly slow. I assume most of this is so the actors can reorganize and move into place for their next scene. The downside to this one-shot method is that to allow the actors said opportunity, the actual film has to focus on individuals walking through the woods, around a lake, and through a campsite over and over again. The film never leaves its lakeside setting, except for the opening and closing of the movie. Most viewers will become frustrated by the film's meandering pace, much more akin to pieces of slow cinema, more Bela Tarr and less Tobe Hooper. But don't let that scare you off. For anyone daring to stick around, there is a hidden gem of existential horror that may help redefine the genre.
بیا خوشگله، بیا سیب بخور. چیه تو دهنشه؟ این انگشت آدمه.
The first 45 minutes of the film follows two of the killers as they walk through the woods and spy on a father and son. It then switches focus to the son as he recollects his father's obsession with a college love while reassuring himself that his own college crush is in no way similar.
کامبیز
اون وقتی دانشجو بوده عاشق یه دختری به اسم مهناز میشه، اما هیچ وقت جرئت نمیکنه اینو به مهناز بگه. الان هم هر زنی غیر از مامانو میبینه فکر میکنه که شبیه مهنازه.
Spoilers, it is. This repetition of lies is going to be pretty important.
معناست چی میگه این وسط؟ معناست که تموم شد ماجراش.
ماجرا مینام دیگه برای من تموم شده بابا.
خیلی خوب.
من که گفتم دیگه مینا رو نمیبینم.
باشه بابا، اوکی.
The son goes on to the campground, introducing us to the rest of the camp. It isn't until the camera reaches the fork at the corner of the river that we get a hint to what is actually going on. The student managing the camp, Parviz, asks about his missing bag.
پروانه تو به وسایل من دست زدی؟
باز شروع نکنه پرویز.
جعبه جای فانوسام نیست.
خب
میگم شاید اونو حواست نبوده گذاشتی تو چادرت قاطی.
Then, off to the left of the shot, we see a pair of twins carrying a rack of ducks. During the next scene, there's a strange moment where the narrator repeats a story he just told, but with a slight difference.
چقدر جالب آقا. من عین این اتفاق قبلا دیدم.
کدوم اتفاق؟
همین که شما از اونجا با این خانم میایی با من حرف میزنی همین چیزا رو میگی.
The camera then flows between multiple characters around the lake, showing their interactions. At one point you hear screaming from a nearby cabin. And eventually, at around an hour and 8 minutes, the camera begins to follow Parviz again.
وسایل من دست زدی؟
باز شروع نکنه پرویز.
خب نیست. من جعبه فانوسام هم نیست.
خب
He's walking along the same path to the same fork, asking Parvana about his bag. But instead of continuing to follow Parviz, the camera then follows Parvena. She continues towards the cars in the opposite direction the camera previously went. The scenes are repeating. Time is looping back around on itself. This is how the movie is going to play out. A looping, overwhelming, and often ponderous unraveling of one period of time, all done from one extremely slow long take. This is also where people are either going to click with this film or completely fall off. Up until this point, audiences will have been anticipating some kind of brutal murder to occur on screen.
چی آقا ترسیدم وا.
The opening titles warn of cannibals with blood splatters in the background. It's gonna be scary. The anticipation for a kill is dragged out an excruciatingly long time.
آخه من کمکی نمیتونم بهتون بکنم
مهمه
و
که شما
بیام.
باش.
اوکی.
Until we get to this point where we are introduced to a repetition of time. Now, the anticipation shifts to something else. Rather than waiting for a kill or some on-screen horror, we begin to anticipate the next loop, the next time repetition, and the appearance of the mysterious twins.
اینجا خط نمیده. فقط مایی.
The entire film shifts from slow burn horror to science fiction mystery. Why is the story repeating? Who are the twins? Is the world ending? What happened to Parviz's bag?
ببین اونجا کوله نبود. نه کوله نبود.
Are the killers ever going to actually do anything? Don't worry, there's still another hour and a half to find out. Mokri stated that the primary influence for the structural design of the film was the work of M.C. Escher. He liked the way Escher's paintings disrupted the idea of reality and bent the perspective of a situation. You could start following one path, loop back around to where you started, and be in a completely different spot. It was Mokri's goal to create a film that could emulate this pattern, confounding the audience as they tried to piece together a narrative timeline. In an interview with Deaf Crocodile, he states that nonlinear narratives are typically meant to be pieced together in the mind, and this puzzle-like nature is part of their appeal.
روایت‌های غیر خطی از مجموعه پلان‌هایی درست شده بود که اونا رو مثل یه پازل در هم می‌ریختیم، ولی مغز میتونست اونا رو با تعریفی که به صورت خطی از زمانداری یکی بکنه. وقتی شما فیلم‌های مختلفی که روایت‌های غیر خطی دارن رو نگاه می‌کنین، در واقع کاری که انجام میدید اینه که اونا رو به شکل خطی تصور می‌کنید و از اینکه اونا یک پازل به هم ریخته زمانی هستن لذت می‌برید. من می‌خواستم این قدرت رو بگیرم از مغز.
His goal was to create a film that would seemingly provide overlapping timelines that would create contradictions and confound his audience, leaving them with a sense of unease and discomfort. He wanted the film to become a piece of magical realism, where the temporal laws ceased to matter despite the picture being filmed in one continuous take. This allows a never-ending escalation of tension, as we are seemingly trapped with the characters in a loop moments before the violence can occur, allowing each character become the tragic lead at the heart of the story despite being an ensemble number. The director of photography was Mohammed Kalari, who worked with Farhadi on A Separation. Due to the experimental nature of Fish and Cat, he used the opportunity to train his son as they trade off filming in 30-minute segments, passing the camera back and forth while the other prepared for their next set of scenes. Mokri stated that his work with Kalari helped escalate the film beyond his own expectations, as a veteran helped hone the mise-en-scene and plan the laborious single take. Fish and Cat would go on to become a critical and commercial success in Iran, and even holds the record for longest-running picture at the Iranian box office, at 9 straight months. So how was Mokri going to follow up a daring take on genre cinema? He was gonna get weird. Before I go into our next film, I'd like to discuss the American distributor of Mokri's films, Deaf Crocodile. This is in no way a sponsored bit, I just really love their work. I have the Mokri film set on Blu-ray as well as many of their animated films, from the silly and surreal Tamala 2010 to the shockingly violent German cat movie Felidae. The stop-motion Pied Piper and Tushko box set are some of my personal favorites. I can't wait for their upcoming line of Soviet animated films, including the extremely influential Snow Queen, which is getting its first ever Blu-ray release. You can get the Mokri box set on their site, including all 4 of his films, as well as the extensive interviews that I used for this video. His other 2 films, while not horror, are still definitely worth checking out. This recommendation does come with a caveat, however. The subtitles for the Mokri films can be a bit rough with multiple errors and nonsensical sentence structure. This was one of their earlier releases, so I hope Deaf Crocodile can put out an updated version of the set with corrected subtitles sometime in the future. This is the only set where I've noticed any kind of issues. The subs on all of their other releases are great. With that out of the way, let's get back to the movies. Invasion is Mokri's 3rd film and the direct follow-up to Fish and Cat. His camera equipment got a decent upgrade, but the same cannot be said for the special effects. And for a sci-fi crime horror romance, this movie has quite a few effect shots. Yes, you heard me right. Sci-fi crime horror romance. He's gotta cover all the bases with this one. Invasion continues the one-shot technique, but now with bespoke set design and dense fog to accentuate the insane choreography this crew has to pull off. Invasion opens on another set of title cards, dropping a ton of exposition and world building. The film takes place in a future where society has been torn apart by a pandemic and the classes have built walls to separate the haves and have-nots. This was done in 2017, by the way. I'm pretty sure Mokri has insider info on the future. I'm actually pretty sure this is commentary on the Iran-Turkey border wall, which began construction during 2017. This wall was constructed by Turkey to keep out lower-class immigrants and, according to them, keep out drug dealers. It's unclear what Mokri feels about this wall besides it's bad, because this movie is so stuffed full of ideas that these opening titles won't matter much in the grand scheme of things. The story follows Ali, who confessed to the murder of his friend Saman after Saman killed 2 of their fellow athletes. They're part of an unspecified future sport named Knucklebones, and the male-only arena for said sport is the primary setting for the film. The police have Ali and his teammates reenacting the day of the murder on repeat in order to try and find discrepancies in Ali's story.
میگن شاید 1000 بارم تکرار کنم. 1000 بار. هر کاری میکنم که این آخرین بار باشه. میگم کار خودم. خودم. تنها.
It just so happens that Saman had a twin sister named this. I'm not going to say that, but I'm just going to call her sister, okay? She looks exactly like him, and she has come across the border in order to play her brother and reveal the truth about his death.
واسطه درست جایی که اون روز سامان وایساده بود. داره میاد سمت من.
This, of course, isn't her entire motive.
بچه‌ها ترسیدن که خواهر سامان مثل خود سامان باشه. میگن میخوان از شرش خلاص شه.
Ali's team plot to stop her by turning the murder reenactment into an actual murder, preventing her schemes and keeping their secrets under wrap. Of course, it isn't going to be that simple with Mokri. After seemingly finishing the reenactment, Ali then assumes the role of another teammate who was in the background during the initial scenes, revealing what occurred from another perspective, repeating all of the events, blurring the lines between reenactment and past, all while inundating the audience with information, bloodletting, plot twists, homoerotic tension, and some reality-bending shenanigans. It is a lot. While Fishing Cat gave you long periods of wandering in order to realign yourself with the perspective shift, Invasion doesn't give you a moment of downtime. Once one loop is done, Ali immediately flows into the next loop. The timeline then becomes a series of concentric circles. As each loop stacks on the past loop, the audience is asked to keep track of not only Ali's perspective, but the previous perspectives. This doesn't take into account that you know the story will loop again, and you're trying to figure out which perspective it's going to shift to next. So you're trying to keep track of the current loop while also keeping in mind all of the events that happened in previous loops, while also looking for clues to the upcoming loop. Good luck if you've got a short attention span and want to check your phone. Look away for a minute or two and you're going to be totally lost. Not all of it works. There are multiple scenes and plot threads that trail off without proper payoff, but the few plot elements that do work are able to provide some extremely sweet payoff. There is one discussion between the sister and the lead detective that seems oddly out of place upon first watch, but ends up having one of, if not the best, full circle moments in the film. While Fishing Cat had a less is more characteristic about it, Invasion throws all of its ideas to the screen to see what sticks. It's also about an hour shorter. In my opinion, this makes Invasion the better of the two as an introduction to Mokri. It has a more direct plot, even if it does become nigh incomprehensible by the end. In another interview with Deaf Crocodile, Mokri discussed the creation and development of the plot. He borrowed many elements from contemporary vampire movies like Park Chan-wook's Thirst, and even borrowed whole lines from Let the Right One In. Oh yeah, did I mention this was a vampire movie? As if it couldn't get any more convoluted. Mokri intentionally chose a stadium because male and female stadiums are separated in Iran. The men-only signs can be seen throughout the film. This way he could create a story about women invading an entirely male society. This decision would go on to have pretty major repercussions for the film. Invasion was nominated for the Teddy Award at the Berlin Film Festival, which is the award for achievements in exploring gender themes.
میخوام سیبیل بذارم. فکر میکنی بهم میاد؟ شنیدم یه چند نفری بهم میگن فردی مرکوری.
This was extremely controversial in Iran. This ended up preventing the film from getting any kind of major release in Iran.
وجود داشت. از اون به بعد ما به مشکلاتی خوردیم و نمایش فیلممون توی ایران بعد از این مدت کوتاهی متوقف شد و بعد فیلم تا مدت‌ها ما نتونستیم فیلم رو به شبکه نمایش پلتفرم‌های مختلف بدیم و این دردسر بزرگی بود که برای فیلم ما به وجود اومد بعد از کاندیداتوری جایزه تدی در جشنواره فیلم برلین.
Mokri states that he never intended for the homosexual undertones and was instead focused on an element of gender fluidity in actors akin to the Shakespearean or traditional Eastern Asian stage performances.
چقدر شبیه سامانی.
من قبلا اینجا اومدم.
کی؟
همیشه. هر وقت سامانو میدیدی با اون چمدون قرمز من توش بودم.
He also wanted to focus on the connection of the twins and whether or not they could be interchangeable or seen as one individual.
اون روزا یادت سامان شعبده بازی کرد؟ رفت تو چمدون بعد از اون ور سالن از پشت صندلی‌ها زد بیرون همتون کف کردیم. اونی که پشت صندلی‌ها بود من بودم.
His primary influence, strangely enough, being Scarlet Witch and her brother Quicksilver.
من اسکارلت ویچم واسه خودم. اگه تو فهمیدی.
Mokri doesn't address the complication of Ali being in love with Saman's sister or Ali's sexuality.
ترجیح دادم اینجور چیزا رو به سامان نگم.
من به سامان گفتم.
تو گوش من قشنگ‌تر بودم. اونی که تو دوست داشتی من بودم.
But he invites fans to engage in discourse and provide their own interpretations.
ایده های کلی فیلم از اینجا می اومد. دوست دارم که تماشاگرها بعد از اینکه این فیلم رو دیدم راجبش شاید یه روزی برای من بنویسن و با اون در موردش حرف بزنن.
It's nigh impossible to analyze these movies without in some way spoiling them. And at the same time, it's hard to discuss spoilers to either of these films without ruining something inherently special about them. If you're remotely interested in these movies, then go check them out and come back. I'm about to get very spoilery and very opinionated. If you can't tell, my opinions sort of sway away from the glowing reviews that are on Letterboxd. But I still think there's something really interesting here. Being such unconventional narratives makes these movies extremely difficult to digest and thereby harder to analyze. Fishing Cat presents us with a series of relationships, usually gendered, and seems to assert a repetitive tragedy. Son repeating the mistakes of his father, Parviz unable to properly communicate his feelings with a past love. Multiple cases of individuals narrating other stories over their own dialogue to show how their current situation reflects another situation. Some patterns feel painfully deliberate and others feel like afterthoughts.
اینجا چیکار میکنی؟
بیشتر شبا خوابای بدی میبینی. شما افتاده بودیم اونجا اون گوشه بعد گربه هم دور براتون میچرخید. همون گربه سیاه دوتا بچه داره.
This creates a sense of disconnection between the various vignettes. As the audience tries and fails to piece together a timeline, Mokri even stated that he wanted to prevent viewers from being able to piece it together. This, combined with the meandering pacing, makes the film a bit of a chore to get through. You'll find yourself drifting in and out of the narrative akin to trying to recall a dream. Parts will stand out to you vividly, and others will fade from your memory almost immediately. Invasion is similar in its dreamlike nature, but starkly opposed in its method of delivery. Where Fishing Cat slow rolls all information, Invasion inundates you with as much as possible from the get-go. By the time you wrap your head around one element of the plot, 3 or 4 more have already been introduced to complicate it. In this way, the two texts almost act as mirrored opposites. In his essay on Fishing Cat, Mohammed Vaadani refers to the structure of Fishing Cat as recursive, formed through the repetitive element but with different scales that each small component of the whole is identical to the whole itself. Each scene in Fishing Cat tells another story of human interaction that is then repeated in the next, but in a slightly different way with different characters. We circle back around to the same point in time at the fork in the road 3 times in total, each leading to a different set of scenes that directly mirror the ones we just witnessed. Badani likens it to Proust's In Search of Lost Time. Wherever we open this novel of 7 volumes, we hear an echo of the narrator's love for Albertine. But why repeat your narrative 3 times if all you do is assert small variations of the same theme? Ladani seems to believe it is to look at the picture holistically and admire how all the themes amplify one another, like pieces of a quilt all coming together to create a beautiful whole. The issue is that many viewers are likely to go through the entire film and not pick up on any of these themes. The repetition then becomes another loop of slow burn tension, or worse, boredom. If I had to identify one element that makes this a horror film, it would be this. The unrelenting repetition and feeling of being trapped in a loop.
من عین این اتفاق قبلا دیدم.
It's like watching Groundhog's Day or Happy Death Day, except Bill Murray never actually ends the day, and the killer never actually kills the main character. Instead, partway through, they just sort of loop back around and it keeps going. The unrelenting repetition and feeling of being trapped in a loop, knowing that something horrible is going to happen but never reaching the catharsis of release. It becomes an existential horror as you sit there watching these people walk around a lake, wasting time before their inevitable demise. It then forces you to think of your own inevitable end and how you spend every day trying to distract yourself from said end by making and or consuming video essays. We are all repeating the same existential pattern that is life, thereby creating our own recursive pattern, wandering around a lake. We, like the characters, come and go from each other's lives, trying to understand and control time, but eventually forced to separate without answers and repeat the entire situation.
Cosmologists think that our universe might actually be Escher-shaped. So some of Escher's work may have anticipated very deep features of modern cosmology.
Using only basic drawing tools, he created Circle Limit 3, an astonishingly accurate representation of space as it edges towards infinity. Nearly 40 years later, mathematicians confirmed that it was absolutely right to the last millimetre.
The very pattern that makes the film beautiful is also its source of existential horror. It is implied multiple times throughout the movie that the world is coming to an end later that night, and yet all these people are still going through the motions. The doomsday clock is stuck at 1 second to midnight, and we're just sitting here clenching, waiting for it to drop. Maybe this is why I found Invasion to be the more digestible film. It still has the 3 cycles, but each cycle in Invasion is shown from a different, but ultimately the same, perspective. This is because the film emphasizes the collective nature of the team along with their collective guilt. They worked together to kill Saman and likewise plotted to kill his sister. Later revelations show that both deaths were also faked, as Ali and maybe the team had fallen in love with Saman and maybe Saman's sister. There's this whole bit about her switching places with him by climbing into a suitcase that is the TARDIS.
ما بچه بودیم همیشه این کارو می‌کردیم.
چیکار؟
وقتی می‌خواستیم از دست بابامون قایم شیم دوتایی می‌رفتیم این تو. این مثل تاردیسه.
مثل چی؟
And she pretended to be Saman and seduced Ali, but Ali didn't realize he had a twin sister, so it's like, what? The murders were committed by team members against team members in order to help sustain Saman's life. He's a vampire and they needed the blood. The murders therefore become a self-induced harm for the sake of a forbidden love. It's much more comprehensible than the existential torture of walking around a lake. To my surprise, the majority of audiences seem to understand and click with Fishing Cat, whereas they're more often confused by Invasion. Mokri himself admits that Invasion is the more complicated text. Maybe my issue comes not from the complexity, but the nature of Fishing Cat as a piece of slow cinema. Watching these people interact and repeat stories is akin to watching Jean Dielman peel potatoes, but there is something hypnotically compelling about the potato peeling that I don't find in Fishing Cat, and I can't help but feel like this problem comes from the choice to focus on a collection of people rather than a singular one. We never have enough time with any of the characters to really connect with them, whereas the entire film is about Jean Dielman and we can feel her struggle as she peels those potatoes. Yet again, the element that so many admire about Fishing Cat, the recursive structure, ends up feeling like its biggest problem. Mokri's 2 genre films are extremely interesting, high-concept pieces that are literally bursting at the seams, held together with duct tape and a dream. They may not be for everyone. Hell, I don't even know if I like them that much, but they're definitely going to resonate with someone. I'd have to recommend them on ingenuity alone. The absurd surrealist elements just help elevate these films further.
But after 1 hour in this film, I think we understand this film is not about a slasher story. It's not about realism, and it's not about it's not about a story. It's about form, it's about time, and it's about surrealism.
Mokri is a distinct voice in Iranian cinema, and definitely someone to keep an eye on as he continues to make his experimental independent films. Working around the restraints of the Iranian censors has allowed him to create genre films that feel totally unique in a market that is oversaturated and homogenized by Hollywood. While these movies may not be as polished as to what you're probably used to, take a chance on your next movie night. Check out Fishing Cat or Pop In Invasion. A big thanks goes out to my executive producer, Blake Partridge. I hope you enjoyed this look into the obscure and fascinating world of independent Iranian cinema, and I'll see you in the next video.
ببین اونجا کوله نبود اینه